Gracious and merciful God, we come before you with gratitude for the enduring love and strength you lavish upon us that we may share it with others. We gather in your presence, seeking inspiration and encouragement as mothers devoted to your purpose. As we dive into tonight's Bible study, allow us to truly see your nature with hearts of faith. God, I pray you give us unwavering trust in your plan, whether we face adversity or good times. No matter the circumstances, we know that we are clothed with your divine protection. Thank you for the calling of motherhood, one of nurturing and of empowering our children to be resilient when they face their own challenges. Help us to model these things in wisdom for our children. Lord, we are so thankful that you have given us the strength to stand by in our conviction when we feel pressured by the world to conform to its standards. Our desire is to raise children who live in your truth. Yahweh, may we have new understanding. Bring to life the perspective that breathes inspiration to our day to day. May we trust in your providence and find hope in you. Teach us to embody the virtues of faith, patience, selflessness, mirroring your character as we navigate life. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. All right. Thank you for that. So I just want to take a moment, and before we dive into the story of Jochebed, which is what we're talking about today, I just want us to reflect on ourselves, our stories. Right now, in this very moment, there was something that you advocated for in order to get here. There was something that you had to be intentional to sacrifice in order to make this space for yourself. And you are serving yourself through this time. There is something that you intended to receive or wanted to have, and that is why you're here. And we serve a God who meets us where we are. He sees who we are and he meets us there. When we are intentional for our own good, he responds with his grace. He responds with his presence. And so I just want you to think about what it is that you gave yourself to get here today. And I want you to know that it is acknowledged, it is seen, and it is understood by the God who crafted you with intention and perfection. And I want to celebrate you for doing that for yourself, because it's not easy. And now we're going to start the story of Jochebed. And what it means to live the mom life in the example that she set for us. And what is mom life? We've gone over this a few times for our Bible studies, but mom life is simply you choosing to measure your moments, being present for yourself. It is owning your story and knowing the power of your truths, who you are, how you've journeyed to get here, what it took for you to stand in this moment for yourself. That's you owning your story. And then meeting your needs, choosing to acknowledge that even though you're a mom, you're not just a mom. You're more than a mom. You are a woman of worth. You were crafted and purposed and designed to stand in the fullness of your making. In your family, yes, but outside of your family too. And when we choose to live the mom life, that's how we recognize that we are absolutely legacy building. So now let's talk about Jochebed. A little bit of history. Jochebed is Moses' mother, and her story can be seen in both Exodus chapter 2 and Exodus chapter 6. So we will read her verses. Now, a man of the tribe of Levi married a Levite woman, and she became pregnant and gave birth to a son. When she saw that he was a fine child, she hid him for 3 months. But when she could hide him no longer, she got a papyrus basket for him and coated it with tar and pitch. Then she placed the child in it and put it among the reeds along the bank of the Nile. His sister stood at a distance to see what would happen to him. Then Pharaoh's daughter went down to the Nile to bathe, and her attendants were walking along the riverbank. She saw the basket among the reeds and sent her female slave to get it. She opened it and saw the baby. He was crying, and she felt sorry for him. "This is one of the Hebrew babies," she said. Then his sister asked Pharaoh's daughter, "Shall I go and get one of the Hebrew women to nurse the baby for you?" "Yes, go," she answered. So the girl went and got the baby's mother. Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Take this baby and nurse him for me, and I will pay you." So the woman took the baby and nursed him. When the child grew older, she took him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. She named him Moses, saying, "I drew him out of the water." And just so that we don't think we just made up the name Jochebed, in Exodus 6, we see the genealogy of Moses. These were the names of the sons of Levi according to their records: Gershon, Kohath, Merari, however you guys pronounce that, it's up to you. Levi lived 137 years. The sons of Gershon by clans were Libni and Shimei. The sons of Kohath were Amram, Izhar, Hebron, and Uziel. Kohath lived 133 years. The sons of Merari and Mali and Mushi. These were the clans of Levi according to their records. Amram married his father's sister, Jochebed, who bore him Aaron and Moses. Amram lived 137 years. Okay, so this is Jochebed's story. In this story, where are you? If you locate yourself, are you in the position of a season of sacrifice? Are you in a season where you're learning to recognize and see your own capacity? Or are you in the season of working to serve your legacy? Because we see all three of those with Jochebed. And in her story, through her life, we learn about the importance of legacy building and parenting. We do this by honoring our convictions, standing in the fullness of who we are without apology. And we see it in how our intention blesses our family in our motherhood journey. So we see self, we see sacrifice, and we see service. And when I'm talking about sacrifice and service, I'm not talking about the sacrifice that typically we think of with motherhood, where we're supposed to give and give and give and give of ourselves until there's nothing left for us. This is the kind of sacrifice where we are really in tune with ourselves and we're saying, okay, in this season, there are a lot of transitions and changes, or in this season, I'm having to practice really being whole and well for myself, or I'm having to let go of things that I'm learning that I held on to for too long. How can I practice balance by giving myself what I need instead of just focusing on what I want? The sacrifice is doing what you need for yourself, even though it may not be what you want to, even though it may not be the easiest thing. The sacrifice comes from putting your needs first. And the service that we're talking about is not serving by giving to others, but it's the kind of service that says, you know what? I need to lay a foundation. I need to make space for myself to grow, or I need to practice being more intentional in this area, or I need to release people to be themselves in this area. I don't have to hold the weight of other people's existence. Service means I get to nurture without holding captive. So I don't have to hold other people's stuff in order to love them. Service is in letting people be themselves, letting people. No matter if it's comfortable and convenient or if it's challenging, we have and deserve to give ourselves right service, to serve ourselves as much as we serve other people. So I just want to make sure, because we learn a lot of unhealthy untruths about mothering, and that's not how we want to move into Jochebed's story. So now that we've gotten that settled, let's talk about her personal struggle. Jochebed's story is one of true self-advocacy, self-discipline, and self-intention. Could you imagine if, when you were giving birth to your children or when your grandchildren were born, there was a law that said that their life was essentially illegal, that in order for them to exist, there would have to be some type of extreme plan in place? When Jochebed gave birth to her son, her youngest son, we know, just based on context, that there was clearly an edict of some kind that said these children born at this time, under this age, at this gender, would have to die. And she was able to see her child. She was able to see herself. She was able to stand in her conviction and put into practice a plan of action that allowed for her family to be blessed by her intention, that allowed for her son to still have a chance to live, and that avoided consequence for her family in the process. We don't often think about how making space to advocate for ourselves by standing in our conviction is a form of self-advocacy. But in each of our mothering journeys, there are convictions that we have. No, I don't want my family to be like this, or no, I don't agree with this mode of operation or this plan of action. There is conviction that we each hold around ourselves and our parenting. And in order for those convictions to become our compass that leads and guides and directs who we are as women, who we are as mothers, and the power of our legacy, we have to be able to stand in those convictions. And in order to do that, we have to advocate for ourselves. We have to say, you know what? I need to take a step back, or I need to take a step away, or I need to set a different plan in motion, or I need to follow a different course of action and intention. And that is what Jochebed did. She resolved in her mind that she was not going to kill her child. She was not going to sacrifice her child. She was going to serve in her best interest, that said, this life deserves to live, even if it's not the way that I foresaw it, even if it's not according to my plan. I'm going to stand in my conviction. She operated for the best interest of herself and her family. She knew the risk that she was taking. She recognized and understood. She was very clear about what she was doing because she was in tune with herself. She knew, and her convictions allowed her to be responsive to what the situation needed. And we could see that because she prepared an entire basket. She pitched it and tarred it and knew exactly where to set it and exactly when to set it out there. She had a plan, and that plan was based on her convictions. And for us, it can be a challenge sometimes to stand in our conviction or to live and mother in our conviction, because things around us are challenging or things around us may be chaotic. But that's where self-advocacy comes into play. What do you need? Are you in tune with yourself right now? Are you being honest and clear about where you are and what you need? And are you putting a plan in place that allows you to meet that need? I think as moms, that's the biggest struggle. You can know what you need. You can understand what you need. You can even know where to go to get what you need. But putting a plan in place and then actually working that plan and executing that plan, that can be a challenge. And that's where you need systems of support. That's where you need systems of community and intentionally acting in your best interest, not out of emotion, but out of clarity and focus. And we see that because she was deliberate. And this is where she drew from. Out of her intention and her focus and her plan, she drew from that space to change her mindset. Because it starts with how we frame the situation, right? Either it's going to be something that was made to defeat us, or it's going to be something that we use to help direct us. This situation doesn't defeat me. It just redirects me. It directs my time. It directs my energy. It directs my focus. It does not defeat me. And it starts with my mindset. It starts with how I choose to decide this situation shows up for myself. Because then my actions follow. And we saw that with Jochebed. She had a plan. She executed her plan. She acted on it. And then the resources that were necessary followed. She had her daughter stand out there. She knew what time of day the Pharaoh's daughter came to the riverbanks. She knew how the currents moved. As I've read and reread, and as Constance and I studied the story, the intricacies of Jochebed's intention to be responsive to herself, to be aware of what she needed and what the situation required of her, is amazing. And it really speaks to the strength that we possess as women, as mothers, to truly interpret how to show up as our best selves to meet the situation. The situation that you are in right now does not defeat you. It directs you. It directs you to the space of recognizing and understanding, how do you need to show up for yourself? What plan do you need to put in place? How do you execute that plan with your actions? And then from that space, the resources follow. It is amazing because we see that even though the situation was challenging, she was in a challenging situation. And I'm sure there were neighbors around her who wanted to do the same thing. I'm sure there were other women who didn't want to lose their children. I'm sure that there were other people who were curious about why she was moving the way that she moved, but it didn't change her intention. It didn't stop her focus. And it did not move her. She remained set on what she saw, the vision that she had of herself. And that takes self-discipline. Self-discipline was the only way that she was able to respond to her situation the way that she did, because she had been developing a character of self-discipline. That's the part of ourselves that we tap into when we get really serious about what we know we deserve. I'm going to practice self-discipline because I know I deserve to be whole. I know I deserve to be healthy. I know my kids deserve the healed version of me. I know that even though they're in a challenging season in their own growth, they deserve to have support. They deserve to have encouragement. They deserve to see themselves. You getting really clear about what you deserve, about what your family deserves. That's how we draw from self-discipline. That's how we build the character of self-discipline, because it takes intention. It takes being really serious about you to give yourself the kind of consistency that builds self-discipline. And we see that. But what even blew my mind more is that her self-discipline, when we know not just what we need, but we know how to tend to what we need, we know how to give to ourselves and what we need, and we're willing to say, even though I don't want this, or even though I do want this, I don't need it. We're demonstrating and living in the legacy of self-discipline. And as we discipline ourselves, our kids see it, our grandkids see it. And even if they can't put it together at that moment in time, because that's not where they are in their own maturity or growth, the more we do it, the more we practice it, it becomes our legacy. It becomes what is associated with who we are, with our character. That's why the Lord doesn't want you to stop growing. That's why he doesn't want you to give up on your dream. That's why he doesn't want you to think that just because you've reached this age now, you don't have to give yourself more time, or you don't have to grow further, or you don't have to say those things. You still do. You still deserve to show up for you, regardless of how old our kids get, regardless of what job we have or what place we're in life. We owe it to ourselves to continue to grow. And Jochebed realized that. She realized that her legacy wasn't just, oh, I birthed the child and now I don't have to do anything else. Or, oh, well, my older kids are already older and I'm going to have to give this one up. So now I'm done. No. Time continues. And if you have time, you have a legacy. And you need to be building into that legacy. And in the same way that Jochebed took the opportunity to use her gifts and her talents, and it may be like it may be a situation where you don't realize your gifts and talents fully. I'm sure that there was something Jochebed learned as a child, as a teen, as a young woman, as a young mother that she drew from to make that basket, tar that basket, pitch that basket, understand how the water went, pay attention to the time in which the Pharaoh's daughter came out, recognize how her daughter needed to be, where she needed to be, in order for all of that to transpire in the way that the Lord designed. And it is not just true for her. It is true for each of us. There is something that has already taken place in your life that you are supposed to draw from, to be the focus, the compass that directs your time and your energy right now. And if you're not sure, then it means that you need to take time. Take some time for yourself, self-advocacy. What do I need so that I can get really clear about it? So that I can draw from the places of my experience and capacity to meet this moment, to meet this situation, and show up for myself. Because that's what self-discipline is. It's me showing up for me by honoring my own boundaries for myself. And it's for me first and then for other people. What impressed me and inspired me is that Jochebed's self-discipline, the Lord had to respond to. He had to show up for her because she was so set and intentional about how she was going to meet the needs of the situation, about how she was going to execute her plan. He had to show up for her, and it showed up in the form of an opportunity. The opportunity was that she got to bless her family. Think about this. In a time where the Hebrew people were slaves in Egypt, they did not get paid for their work. Nobody was making money. But her willingness to be intentional and execute her plan, the Pharaoh's daughter paid her, gave her a reward. The Lord rewarded her intention and obedience with actual resources, financial resources that built and blessed her family for standing in the intention of who she was. She showed up for herself, and the Lord had to respond. So not only did she get a job, she had a form of payment to supply for and provide for her family. She got the distinction of being associated with the kingdom of Pharaoh. So people knew who she was. So it added to the distinction of who she was as a woman. And she got to build and bless the life of the child that she already knew she wasn't going to get to raise because he was returned to her home. And this is the Lord's plan for each of us. When we get really intentional to be in tune with ourselves, see the needs of the situation that we're in with clarity, not out of emotion, but out of clarity, and draw from that place to set the right mindset and execute our plan. Heaven has to pay attention. And the Lord responds. And not only does he respond, but he will put the right people in the place that show you that your gifts and talents matter. Who you are is seen and recognized, and he multiplies what you have in the form of opportunities. He returns to you your intention, but he returns it multiplied. She went from being a slave and making no money to being a woman that was associated with the kingdom, a mother, a wife, and a woman whose gifts and talents were multiplied through her financial resources. Y'all, mind-blowing. Mind-blowing. And it's not just her story. It is each of our story because we were designed to live with self-intention. Living with self-intention is you standing in your distinction, not diminishing the parts of your story that say this is who you are. Yes, you may have been in a situation, but that's not who you are. That was a situation. The Lord wants you to look at that situation, look at that moment, and realize and recognize the parts of you that resonate most with your gifts, with your talents, and then use that, draw from that place to meet your needs in the situation. Because he hasn't left you without a plan. He hasn't left you without a resource. But when you get really clear and intentional about saying, this may not be what I want, or this may not be the way that I want it, but I'm going to discipline myself. I'm going to get really serious about what I know I deserve. And I'm going to act on that. Then the Lord's like, okay, now I can show up for you. Now I can bring opportunities into your path. Now I can bring the right people to remind you that you are seen and that who you are is exactly who I've made you to be. And I can multiply what you have because you're serious about using it to build your legacy. Self-intention is who we are at our core, right? Us recognizing who we are. So through Jochebed's story, we can see that she had to be dependable and trustworthy. Otherwise, her husband would have been like, excuse me, what are you doing with that baby? We're not supposed to have him. Yes, he may be ours, but he's supposed to die. We don't see that there were debates or conversations had between her and her husband, but I infer that he trusted her. He trusted her judgment because he knew that she was a woman who didn't act out of a place of emotion. She chose to be clear. She chose to be intentional and level-headed. The same kind of intention that allows you to weave and make a basket, pitch it and tar it and know where to place it. She brought that same kind of intention into everything that she did. So he trusted her. She was a woman who he saw was a nurturer because of how she had raised their other two children. And Pharaoh's daughter had to see her as trustworthy, to know, okay, yes, I'm giving you this child to nurse, but I want him back. She had to come across as dependable and trustworthy. Not only that, but she had to have a history of showing up. Because when the eyes of the palace brought scrutiny to their home, she couldn't change anything up. She couldn't switch up. She had to have the same kind of continuity of character and the same kind of self-discipline that would not bring shame on their home or questions, but would help to build the kind of confidence that people saw when they saw her, or the same kind of confidence that people had when they saw her, when they encountered her. And she had to have moved with conviction in the direction of her faith. And that expectation, her hope was that by executing my plan and being consistent in my character, I am going to receive exactly what I believe I deserve. Are you believing that based on what you're doing right now in this season, you're going to receive exactly what you know you deserve? If you are, I stand fully in agreement with you. But if you are struggling to see it, I want to remind you that you have the tools to advocate for yourself, to discipline yourself for what you know you deserve and set your intentions on it, so that heaven has to respond to bless your family, to bless you, and to allow you to stand fully in the distinction of who you are. I believe that is why you are here today, because there is something that you're supposed to see about who you are and your capacity to show up for yourself and meet your needs. You're not lacking anything. You have it already. You have the ability to advocate. You have the ability to discipline yourself. You have the ability to be intentional and move in the direction of your conviction to get what you deserve. So how does this translate to parenting? Because it's easy when it's like just you and you can focus just on yourself. But when you add kids and spouses and partners and exes into the mix, it gets hard. It gets really hard. But I believe that that's where the sacrifice comes into play the most, where it becomes the most important, because self-advocacy builds your legacy. When Jochebed gave up her child, she recognized that the situation that she was in prevented her from mothering in the way she thought she would. But it didn't stop her. Your sacrifice, your willingness to see, even though this situation is not ideal, even though it's not what I want it to be, it doesn't stop me. I still possess the ability and the opportunity to meet my needs. And nobody is saying that you have to meet your needs, all of your needs in a day. But if you can plan to meet some of your needs, if you can purpose and be intentional about recognizing and honoring those needs, even if it's just a couple, that is what builds your legacy. That is what sets the tone and exemplifies the truth of who you are. She put her son in the best situation that she could, even if she understood it wasn't with her the way she thought. He was in the best situation that he could be in. And for some of us, we're still holding on to guilt and shame over recognizing that we had to put our children in the best situation that they needed in that season, even though it didn't look like we foresaw. So there are people who are living with guilt and shame over an abortion, over an adoption, and that's not the Lord's will for us. His will for us is to free ourselves, even if it was a miscarriage, to free yourself from holding guilt or shame or condemnation. Because when we are honest about meeting our needs and being real about where we are, setting our discipline and intention on what we know we truly deserve, and being willing to sacrifice what we want for what we need, that is the important part of legacy building, because that's the part that builds the discipline. That's the part that garners the intention of heaven. And it also requires us to have a willing heart, a heart that sees and loves, a heart that is aware of how to come to terms with a decision that we've made, to understand that even though, just like Jochebed, even though mothering wouldn't look the same, even though it would be different, it didn't mean that her son wasn't a part of her legacy. It didn't mean that she wasn't his mother anymore. It was just showing up in a different way, even in a challenging situation. And we have to recognize that for ourselves, whether it's a season of change, whether it's a season of loss, whether it's a season of transition. Even though the season is challenging, You deserve to have the heart that loves yourself, have the heart that is gentle with you so that you can come to terms with the decisions, so that you can come to terms with the self-advocacy and the needs of right now, because you matter. And this situation does not define you, it directs you. It is supposed to direct you to take inventory and see, where do I need to show up for myself more? Where do I need to practice more patience? Where do I need to practice forgiveness? Where do I need to practice release? And that's the next part of sacrifice, being able to understand the balance between what you need to nurture and what you need to let go of. That is one of the hardest things that we each experience as mothers. And when you think about it, Jochebed had to do it twice. She had to be willing to practice the balance of nurture and release twice. The first time was in putting her baby in that river. And the second time was giving him to the Pharaoh's daughter for her to raise as her own. Sacrificing what you've nurtured, recognizing and being in tune with where you're supposed to surrender. That is important. That balance is important, because when we release what we are supposed to let go of in the right time and in the right season, there is a process, there is a purpose and a power that we get to witness. The Lord is saying, release it so that you can be objective, because the harder and closer you hold it, the less objectivity you have. You're trying to control a situation that you weren't even meant to hold on to. So release it. Release it so that it can grow and so that it can become what it was meant to be, and you can see it with objectivity. That was a powerful part of Jochebed's story that I, as a mom of teens, am bearing witness to for the first time. There are places where the Lord is saying, you got to release this. You want control of it, but you got to release it. You want to have a say in it, but it's not yours. And as parents, that's hard. As moms, that's hard. When you have a vision of your kids, when you have an idea of who you want them to become, and their own experiences start shaping them, their own encounters start bringing out of them their own direction, their own purpose, their own understandings, that change, so that their purpose, their gifts get to come to life too. It's hard. And I cannot imagine having to give my children up twice, having to release them completely from having any say or any awareness of who they're becoming. But when you think about it, Jochebed got to witness Moses's maturity from afar. She got to be objective in his story to see who he was becoming, because she was willing to release it, because she was willing to surrender. And even though she had to watch him grow up from afar, she could see the fruit of her intention. Him even just being alive was the fruit of her intention, her being self-intended, her being self-disciplined, her advocating for herself, all of that. He was the living, breathing embodiment of her legacy in real time. And sometimes we struggle with our desire to hold and to keep for ourselves what the Lord is asking us to release, what he is imploring us to release, what he is bringing into our awareness, that he's like, hey, let this go. I got it. Trust me with it. I'm going to take care of this. But the longer you hold it, the tighter you grab it, the more you keep yourself from recognizing and seeing your legacy. you have to be willing to let some stuff go. It's imperative. And if we don't, especially with our kids, we create enabling tendencies and unhealthy patterns of behavior for them, because we're essentially saying, no, 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 I'm going to manage you. I'm going to manage everything about you. And if we're doing that, how do they get to learn that type of self-control? How do they get to learn how to advocate for themselves? How do they get to learn to be self-aware? They don't. And we're the same. That's why the Lord is like, hey, let this go so that you can start asking for what you need, so that you can start being aware of how to meet your needs and to show up for yourself. You got to let this go so you can know how to grow. And that's where intentional parenting comes in. This part, and Constance can attest to it, when we read this part, it was like an awe-inspiring moment, like an aha moment, because I don't think I ever really understood that Moses's mom didn't name him. I never understood that. The Pharaoh's daughter named Moses, and she named him based on how she experienced him. Her naming him was what helped him to live fully in his purpose. Him encountering the objectivity of another person, him encountering these people outside of his home, was what helped him to live in his purpose. I don't know if anybody else can attest to this. If you want to come off mute, if you want to give a thumbs up emoji, y'all, as a mom, there were times when I thought, I cannot believe that happened to my child. And I was just indignant and irate and upset, ready to just like step in and hurt somebody's feelings and go to bat for my babies. And when I read this, it was like, oh my gosh, they had to go through that. My child had to encounter this person this way so that it could build within them a level of understanding and awareness of themselves so that they could live in their purpose. It is really easy to want to hold that tight and want to take offense when really the Lord is saying, oh, no, 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 they have to go through this, just like you did. There was something that we each went through that when you came out on the other side of it, you were like, this is me. This is me. This is me. And this is how I live in my purpose. This is how I own the space of life that has been created for me. Our kids are no different. But when you look at the fact that this woman bore this child, and yet his purpose, the entirety of his existence did not come to light and have the fullness to express itself until he encountered people outside of his home. This is why people have to leave their homes. This is why we have to have community. This is why our kids have to be shaped by their own experiences outside of us. Because there is somebody that can see your child in a way you can't. There is somebody who sees you in a way that you can't see yourself. And the Lord brings those people into our path to remind us of our purpose. He brings those people across our awareness so that we can say, this is me. I forgot that that was my name. I forgot that I possessed that ability. Moses would not have been able to live in his purpose if he had stayed with his mom. If he had stayed in his family, insulated in the bubble of Hebrewism, he wouldn't have been Moses because he wouldn't have been drawn out of water. So then the Lord wouldn't have been able to draw the children of Israel out of the water. He literally used his name and multiplied the impact of his name so that he could live in his purpose, because the Lord used Moses to draw people out of water. He parted the Red Sea so that they could walk through on dry land and encounter the freedom he had made them for. And it is true for each of us. There is a part of you that is supposed to exist through challenge so that you get to see and live in the fullness of your purpose. And it requires you to be shaped by your experiences. It requires the challenge. But that's where the self-truth and the self-disclosure come into play, because that helps you to advocate in building your legacy. That helps you to be more intentional about where you're disciplining yourself for your legacy. And Moses' story was shaped by the Pharaoh's daughter, by the Pharaoh, and even the Egyptian man that he ends up killing, to return back to his people and live in the fullness of his purpose. That's why the situation doesn't defeat you, it directs you. And then we see service. So in our motherhood journey, the service that we give to ourselves is the service of surrender. We talked about the balance between nurture and release, but the service of surrender reminds us that in every season, there is something that we have to give back. There is something that the Lord is requiring of us to give to him, give back to him, and let go of, so that we are able to walk in our purpose. And if we don't surrender, we run the risk of holding on to things that are no longer serving a purpose, that are no longer building or blessing anywhere around us. Surrendering is like pruning. It is like a self-pruning measure, a self-preservation measure, so that we don't lose the core of who we are by taking on things that don't belong to us. We surrender the things that we have outgrown, the things that no longer serve us, the things that are not ours to carry or hold or bear. We get to surrender those things as a way of reminding ourselves that we are not God, that there are things outside of our control, and that it is important for us to be sober-minded about our purpose. Because our purpose has to be met with our energy, with our efforts, with our time. And if we're diverting and using all of our energy and time on the things that don't even matter, then our purpose doesn't get what it deserves. We are not able to live in the fullness of what it is that we're actually supposed to be giving ourselves. And the Lord makes surrender the way in which we remind ourselves how to do that. Let go of what doesn't serve you right now. Let go of what isn't yours to hold or carry or control. Let go of what isn't meeting your needs. But you cannot do that without self-advocacy. You cannot do that without being clear about what it is that you do need. Moses is a part of Jochebed's legacy because she was willing to surrender. Could you imagine the weight of trying to raise a baby in secret? Could you imagine how that would have changed her? How that would change you? Trying to nurture your purpose in secret? That doesn't work. That doesn't work. So when Jochebed was willing to surrender, the Lord showed up to help her intention come to the fullest expression through her purpose. Not only was she serving her purpose, but she was building her legacy at the same time. There is power in surrendering because we get to witness and recognize the hand of the Lord in our lives. When we surrender and give to him what he's saying, let go of, he shows up to multiply our time, to bring us new opportunities, and to grow our awareness. For Jochebed, it was in her witnessing the Lord's protection. She got to witness that he was going to be faithful to what she had prayed for. He was going to honor her intention by allowing this child that she had to watch and witness grow up away from her, become a man. The Lord showed up to protect her children in the same way he intends to protect ours. When we are willing to see in the seasons of change, in the seasons of evolution of motherhood, that our surrender is necessary, the Lord reminds us, like, I'm going to take care of them. You don't have to hold the weight of their existence in your hands. I will show up. I will protect. I will be who I promised you I would. So I need you to tend to yourself. I need you not to disappear. I need you not to shrink. I need you not to get lost in the shuffle. I need you to exist in this space in the fullest possible way. And that's you standing in your distinction. We see the power of Jochebed's presence and her intention to create the right kind of conditions to nurture her children so that they learned what it looked like to stand in their distinction, to walk out their convictions, to direct their energy and their focus in their purpose with clarity, without excuse, without apologizing, without diminishing, without shrinking. They got to see what it looked like to be steadfast. And in the same way, our children learn from us when we choose to be intentional and stand in our distinction. And how do we do that? We make space for ourselves. Jochebed's example shows us how to make space for ourselves and to be in tune with what we need, how to honor our intentions, and how to allow ourselves to process the emotions that come with every season. And she did it in a healthy way. If we think that she didn't grieve, if she wasn't saddened, if she didn't have the weight of the loss, we would be deceiving ourselves to think that she, in her humanness, didn't have those experiences. But clearly there was something about her being able to resolve and reconcile because she was so intentional, and because she was choosing self-discipline, and because she was making space for herself. It didn't stop her from still giving to her other kids. It didn't stop her from living in the fullness of herself and from creating a legacy that outlived her. Being able to accept the changes that take place when we have to let go of things and surrender, whether it's a surrender that comes by choice or by force, allowing ourselves to recognize that that's a way of pruning and conserving the core of who we are is important, because it keeps us from getting lost in the emotions that accompany the challenges of motherhood. And we each deserve that space. So now we get to our mental health takeaways. What do we need to practice for our own spiritual growth, for our own clarity, for our own mental well-being? What do we need a little bit more of? Maybe it's self-advocacy for you. Maybe it's you getting in tune with your needs and acting in a way that allows you to meet those needs. Maybe it's self-discipline. Maybe you struggle with honoring the commitments that you've made for yourself and carving out intentional time for you to be consistent in what you've said. Maybe it's the self-intention. Maybe you have grown accustomed to shrinking or diminishing what you do, or not accepting the compliments, or not seeing what you have accomplished. Whether it's just through you or what you're recognizing through the lives of your children or your grandchildren, they are your legacy in real time. But if you don't make space for yourself, if you're not intentional about standing in the fullness of yourself, we lose sight of how important our days, our hours, our minutes become in shaping and building legacy around us. Jochebed shows us that our legacy is built by living and owning the fullness of who we are. When we choose to be in tune with ourselves and meet our needs, honoring ourselves, sacrificing what we want for what we actually need, and choosing to serve ourselves by making space for our own growth, we exemplify for our family what it means to live in and with purpose. And that is important. You deserve that. They deserve that. So let's stop for a moment and kind of gauge for ourselves, like, what questions resonate with you? Where in your mothering journey are you as you look at Jochebed's story? Because there are pieces of her story that resonate in every season and stage of motherhood. Out of these questions, is there one that is standing out to you? Is there something that you're recognizing like, oh yeah, I need to take some time with this one. I need to let this resonate a little bit more and get in tune with myself so that I actually know the answer and then can be responsive to myself based on what I need. If you want to take a screenshot so that you can have them for later, feel free. But definitely give yourself space to ask and answer these questions for yourself. And then here's a little bit of life application from Jochebed's story that we can each take. Feel free to screenshot this if you need. That way you can put into practice some of these life application skills for yourself, tools for yourself, resources for your own growth and benefit. And then we have the affirmation of Jochebed. I understand the importance of being responsive to changes in my needs, in the changing seasons and situations. I am willing to sacrifice what I want for what is necessary, demonstrating self-discipline. I live with intention, fully aware of what is required to stand in a place of distinction, practicing self-awareness, self-advocacy, and self-control. Like Jochebed, I move and operate with confidence and assurance, setting my intentions and moving with conviction towards my faith, expecting to see my hopes fulfilled by the living God. I honor my intentions and bless my family even in difficult times. I embrace the parenting challenge of learning to let go as my children evolve, so that what they need is drawn out of them to walk in purpose. I strive to balance nurturing and allowing my children to live in the fullness of their path and purpose. On my spiritual journey for growth, I recognize God's protection over me and my children. I create the right conditions to nurture them and help them stand in distinction. I exercise faith in action, walking through challenges and laying the foundation for our future. And please feel free to screenshot that if you need it. And that is it, ladies. We have come to the conclusion of Jochebed's story. If there is something that resonated with you, if there's something that you recognize the Lord brought you here today just to hear and know, I would love to hear it. Constance and I would absolutely love to hear it. I'm going to stop recording so that this is a safe space to share.